They thought no help was coming. Then human warship came roaring from the void. As pirate corvettes aligned for the killing blow, and New Cleo plunged into darkness. Governor Vasquez watched through the periscope, breath held. Suddenly, the massive UES Vanguard materialized behind the pirate fleet, its stealth field dropping as plasma batteries unleashed a devastating, precise barrage that shattered the enemy forces. The cobalt seas of New Cleo shimmered under the pale light of twin moons, their gentle waves lapping against the crystal marshes that encircled the colony's main settlement. Governor Marin Vasquez stood at the observation deck of the administrative dome. Her eyes, fixed on the distant horizon where the last of the day's light was fading. 2 months had passed since the first pirate raid, and with each passing day, the situation grew more desperate. "Governor," a voice called from behind her. "The council is waiting." Marin turned to see Lyle Omari, the colony's chief engineer, standing in the doorway. His usually cheerful face was drawn with worry, dark circles under his eyes, evidence of the sleepless nights they'd all endured lately. "Tell them I'll be there in a moment," she replied, turning back to the view. The orbital farms, once a source of pride for the colony, were now barely functioning. Without the regular supply shipments, cut off by the pirate blockade, New Cleo was slowly starving. Marin's past as a military logistics officer seemed a lifetime ago. She had come to New Cleo seeking peace, a chance to build rather than destroy. Now, that same military experience was all that stood between the colony and disaster. She straightened her jacket, a habit from her service days, and followed Lyle to the council chamber. The chamber was filled with anxious faces. Arya Sorn, the communications officer, sat hunched over her datapad, her fingers moving ceaselessly across the screen as she monitored what remained of their communications network. Elder Priestess Nima, spiritual leader of the Marshborn, the indigenous people who had welcomed the human settlers, sat in quiet dignity, her ceremonial robes glittering with crystal shards harvested from the marshes. "Governor," Arya began as soon as Marin took her seat. "We've lost contact with another supply convoy. That's the third this month." Murmurs rippled through the assembled council members. Fear was becoming a constant companion in these meetings. "What about the hydroponic farms?" Marin asked, turning to the agricultural representative. 2 weeks of supplies left, at best," came the grim reply. "The soil nutrients from the last shipment were contaminated. We're trying to synthesize alternatives, but—" Marin nodded, understanding the unspoken conclusion. Without outside help, New Cleo would begin to starve. The colony had been established as an agricultural outpost, meant to eventually become self-sufficient. But they weren't there yet. The crystal marshes, while beautiful, contained soil too caustic for traditional farming. The orbital hydroponics had been the answer, until the pirates began targeting them. "We should evacuate while we still can," one council member argued. "Use the remaining freighters to get as many people out as possible." "And go where?" another countered. "Even if we could fit everyone, which we can't, the nearest colony is 2 weeks' travel. The pirates would intercept us before we made it halfway." "Then we fight," a third voice suggested. "Convert the mining equipment into weapons. We have engineers. We can—" "We are farmers and scientists, not soldiers," the first council member interrupted. "This colony was founded on principles of peace." Marin listened to the debate rage around her, feeling the weight of every life in the colony pressing down on her shoulders. They had come to the edge of the Orion expanse, seeking a new beginning, not an end. "Enough," she said finally, her voice cutting through the arguments. "We will not abandon New Cleo, nor will we transform ourselves into an armed camp. At least not yet. Arya, keep scanning for any passing vessels. Lyle, I want you to focus on strengthening our communications array. If we can get a message to the Coalition fleet—" "The nearest patrol is at least a month away," Arya reminded her. "And our long-range comms have been degraded since the last attack. Marin met her gaze steadily. Then we'll have to get creative. The meeting continued. Plans made and discarded. Resources allocated and reallocated. By the time it ended, night had fallen completely, and the bioluminescent flora of the crystal marshes had begun to glow, casting an eerie blue light across the settlement. Marin returned to her quarters, exhaustion seeping into her bones. She had just begun to review the day's reports when her personal comm unit crackled to life. "Governor," Arya's voice came through, tense and urgent. "You need to hear this." A moment later, a garbled transmission played. "All convoys destroyed. Vesta Station. Help." The message cut off in a burst of static. "Vesta Station?" Marin asked, already reaching for her jacket. "Yes," Arya confirmed. "It came through on an emergency frequency. The signal was weak, but it's definitely from Vesta." Vesta Station was the nearest Coalition outpost, a small way station that served as a hub for supply convoys. If it had fallen, Marin was halfway to the communications center when the alarms began to wail. She broke into a run, bursting onto the central plaza just in time to see the night sky light up with fire. The orbital farms, hanging in geosynchronous positions above the colony, had erupted into flames. "Pirate corvettes," Lyle reported, appearing at her side, his face illuminated by the inferno above. "They must have been waiting, cloaked." Marin watched in horror as the carefully cultivated hydroponic gardens burned. With them went any hope of the colony surviving on its own resources. "Evacuation protocols," she ordered, her military training taking over. "Get everyone to the shelters. Arya, try to reach..." A tremendous explosion cut her off as the main communications array, located on the outskirts of the settlement, erupted into flames. In one calculated strike, the pirates had destroyed both their food supply and their ability to call for help. "They're being thorough this time," Lyle observed grimly. Marin's mind raced. The pirates had never been this aggressive before. Previous raids had been quick smash-and-grab operations, targeting supply ships or stealing equipment. This was different. This was systematic. "They're not just raiding," she realized aloud. "They're trying to wipe us out." As the colonists hurried to the underground shelters, Marin gathered her core team in the Emergency Operations Center, a reinforced bunker beneath the administrative dome. "Report," she demanded, as soon as the blast doors sealed behind them. "Communications are completely down," Arya said, her voice steady despite the strain visible on her face. "The main array is destroyed, and the backup systems are jammed." "Power grid is holding for now," Lyle added. "But if they target the solar collectors, we'll be on emergency reserves." "Casualties?" 12 injured. No fatalities yet," the medical officer reported. "But the toxic smoke from the orbital fires is beginning to rain down on the marshes. If it contaminates our water supply..." Marin nodded grimly. The pirates had planned this well. Cut off their food, their communications, and soon their water. The message was clear: surrender or die. But surrender wasn't in Marin's vocabulary. Not anymore. "Lyle," she said, turning to the engineer, "can you build a signal booster? Something that could punch through the jamming?" Lyle frowned, running calculations in his head. "Maybe. I'd need to cannibalize parts from other systems. And even then, it would be a short-range solution. We'd need someone close by to hear us." "Arya, what about the deep space frequencies? The ones used by Coalition warships?" The communications officer shook her head. "Those require specialized equipment. We'd need..." She stopped, her eyes widening. "Wait. The old survey satellite. The one in polar orbit." "What about it?" Marin asked. "It's pre-coalition tech. Different frequencies. Different encryption. The pirates might not have thought to jam it." Hope flickered to life in Marin's chest. "Can you access it?" "If Lyle can boost our signal strength enough to reach it, yes. But Governor, even if we can send a message, Who would hear it? The nearest coalition patrol is— I know, Marin cut her off. But we have to try. What other choice do we have? As the night wore on, the pirate corvettes maintained their orbital blockade, occasionally firing on the settlement's outer buildings. The message was clear. They were toying with their prey. In the underground shelter, colonists huddled together, parents comforting frightened children, friends supporting each other. Elder Priestess Nima moved among them, her serene presence a balm to frayed nerves. The Marshborn, with their deep connection to the planet, had recognized the settlers' peaceful intentions and had welcomed them. Now, they shared in the colony's peril. Marin visited the shelter briefly, offering what reassurance she could. But the truth was stark. Without external help, New Cleo was doomed. Returning to the operations center, she found Lyle and Arya bent over a makeshift device, a jumble of wires and components salvaged from various systems. "Will it work?" she asked. Lyle looked up, his face streaked with sweat and grime. "It's not pretty, but it should boost our signal enough to reach the satellite. After that, it's up to Arya." Arya nodded, her fingers flying over the control interface. "I've been scanning the beacon logs. There's a lot of static, but I've detected some deep space transmissions. Coalition ships, maybe, or independent freighters." "How long until we can send a message?" "The satellite will be in optimal position in about an hour," Arya said. "But, Governor, there's something else." She hesitated, then continued. "I've been thinking about a way to amplify our signal even further. A kind of long-range beacon that could reach well beyond the Orion expanse." "What's the catch?" Marin asked, sensing the reluctance in Arya's voice. "It would require a massive power surge. We'd have to reroute everything: life support, defense systems, even the emergency reserves. And once we fire it, we'd be in the dark," Lyle finished for her. "Completely vulnerable." Marin considered the options. Stay as they were and face slow starvation, or a more direct assault when the pirates grew tired of waiting. Or gamble everything on a desperate call for help that might not be answered. In her former life as a military officer, Marin had been trained to make difficult choices. But those had been abstract exercises, hypothetical scenarios in which the consequences were measured in points, not lives. This was different. This was real. "Do it," she decided finally. "Prepare the beacon, but we wait until the last possible moment." The next few hours passed in a flurry of activity. Lyle and his team worked to reroute the colony's power grid, while Arya fine-tuned the satellite uplink. Marin coordinated with the security team, positioning the few weapons they had, mostly mining lasers and construction tools repurposed for defense. As dawn approached, the pirate corvettes began to move into a new formation. Through the emergency periscope, Marin could see them aligning for what could only be a final bombardment. "They're tired of waiting," she observed grimly. "Governor," Arya called from her station. "The satellite is in position. We're ready to transmit." Marin took a deep breath, aware that every eye in the operations center was on her. This decision would determine the fate of New Cleo. "Send the message," she ordered, "and prepare to fire the beacon." Arya's fingers flew across the controls, sending a desperate plea for help into the void of space. Then, with a nod from Marin, she activated the power reroute. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The lights in the operations center dimmed, then went out completely, replaced by the eerie red glow of emergency lighting. Throughout the colony, systems shut down as power was diverted to the communications array. "Power at maximum," Lyle reported, his voice tense. "Beacon ready to fire." Above them, the pirate corvettes had completed their alignment. Through the periscope, Marin could see the glow of their weapon systems powering up. "Now!" she commanded. Arya pressed the final sequence. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a high-pitched whine filled the air as the makeshift beacon drew every last watt of power from the colony's grid. The emergency lights flickered and died, plunging the operations center into darkness. In the silence that followed, Marin held her breath. Had it worked? Or had they just sacrificed their last defenses for nothing? Through the periscope, she watched the pirate corvettes, expecting at any moment to see the flash of their weapons. But something strange was happening. The corvettes had halted their approach, hanging motionless in orbit. "Why aren't they firing?" someone whispered in the darkness. And then Marin saw it. A shadow, vast and imposing, materializing behind the pirate fleet as a stealth field disengaged. The silhouette was unmistakable, the angular, predatory shape of a coalition battleship. "It worked," she breathed, hardly daring to believe it. Before anyone could respond, the darkness was split by a series of brilliant flashes as the battleship opened fire. Not on the colony, but on the pirate corvettes. Precision plasma strikes disabled their weapons and engines, leaving them drifting helplessly in orbit. A moment later, the operations center's emergency systems sputtered back to life as external power was somehow restored. The communications console crackled, and a voice, crisp, authoritative, female, filled the room. "New Clio Colony. This is Captain Alara Miyamoto of the UES Vanguard. We received your distress signal and have neutralized the immediate threat. Stand by for ground team deployment." A cheer erupted in the operations center, relief and disbelief mingling in equal measure. Marin felt a weight lift from her shoulders, even as a new sense of urgency took its place. "Arya, acknowledge the transmission," she ordered. "Lyle, coordinate with their engineering team to restore full power. I want damage reports from all sectors." As the colony stirred back to life, Marin made her way to the main landing pad, where the first shuttles from the Vanguard were touching down. Marines in combat armor secured the perimeter, while medical teams rushed to treat the injured. Captain Alara Miyamoto strode down the shuttle ramp, her uniform immaculate, her bearing unmistakably military. She was taller than Marin had expected, with short cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Governor Vasquez," she said, extending a hand. "Captain Alara Miyamoto, UES Vanguard." Marin clasped the offered hand. "Captain, your timing is impeccable." A slight smile touched Miyamoto's lips. "That's rather the point of the responder corridor. New technology, still in the testing phase. We register emergency beacons along specific routes and respond as quickly as possible." "We're grateful," Marin said simply. "Without your intervention." "I understand," Miyamoto nodded. "We've secured the pirate vessels and taken their crews into custody. My engineers are already working to restore your power grid and communications." As they walked through the settlement, Marin briefed the captain on the colony's situation: the destroyed orbital farms, the contaminated water supply, the dwindling food stores. "We'll provide emergency supplies," Miyamoto assured her. "Enough to sustain the colony until regular shipments can resume. And I've dispatched a squadron to Vesta Station to investigate the distress call you received." "Do you think there are survivors?" Marin asked. The captain's expression remained neutral. "We'll know soon enough." In the days that followed, New Clio began to recover. The Vanguard's engineers, working alongside Lyle and his team, repaired the damaged infrastructure. Specialized units used advanced filtration systems to purify the toxic rainwater that had fallen on the crystal marshes. The pirate corvettes, now secure in the Vanguard's hold, yielded valuable intelligence. The leader of the pirate fleet, a notorious raider known as Commodore Rax Kor, had targeted New Clio as part of a larger campaign to destabilize coalition influence in the Orion Expanse. He didn't expect resistance, Captain Miyamoto explained during one of their briefings. And he certainly didn't expect a battleship to respond to a colony's distress call. Marin spent long hours working with the captain, planning for the colony's future security. The pacifist ideals that had guided New Clio's founding were admirable, Miyamoto acknowledged, but in the frontier of space, they were also dangerous. Peace through strength, the captain said. It's an old concept, but it endures because it works. A week after the Vanguard's arrival, news came from Vesta Station. The outpost had indeed been attacked, but a handful of survivors had managed to send the distress call that Marin's team had intercepted. They were now safe aboard a coalition medical ship. On the evening before the Vanguard was scheduled to depart, the colonists gathered in the Grand Plaza for a celebration. Crystal lanterns, a traditional Marshborn craft, illuminated the space with their soft, multicolored glow. Elder Priestess Nema led a ceremony of gratitude, her melodic voice rising in a chant that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Marin found Captain Miyamoto standing at the edge of the plaza, observing the proceedings with interest. "Your people have remarkable resilience," the captain commented. "They're not all my people," Marin corrected, nodding toward Elder Nema. "The Marshborn were here first. They've taught us much about adaptation and survival." "A valuable lesson," Miyamoto agreed. "One that the coalition as a whole would do well to remember." As the celebration continued, Marin felt a sense of purpose crystallizing within her. The crisis had changed her, reminding her of the leader she had once been, and could be again. "What will you do now?" Miyamoto asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Rebuild," Marin answered. "But differently this time. We'll establish the early warning system you suggested. Train a civilian defense force. And the militia." Marin had resisted this particular recommendation, clinging to the colony's founding principles. But the reality of their situation was undeniable. "Yes," she conceded. "A militia as well, but with strict oversight and a clear defensive mandate. We won't become what we're fighting against." Miyamoto nodded approvingly. "A wise balance. The Vanguard will leave you with some basic defense systems. Nothing that could be considered offensive weaponry, but enough to discourage opportunistic raiders." The next morning, as the Vanguard prepared to depart, Marin stood on the observation deck once more, watching as shuttles ferried supplies and personnel back to the massive battleship. Arya approached, her step lighter than it had been in weeks. "The new communications array is online," she reported, "and Captain Miyamoto has provided us with access codes for the responder corridor. If we need help again—" "We won't," Marin said firmly. "At least, not the same kind of help. We'll be prepared next time." Lyle joined them, wiping grease from his hands. "The power grid is fully restored, and the orbital farms—" He hesitated. "Well, they're a total loss, but the Vanguard's engineers have given us plans for a more resilient design. We'll rebuild them stronger." Marin nodded, feeling a surge of pride in her team, in the entire colony. They had faced annihilation and emerged not just alive, but determined to thrive. As the final shuttle departed, Captain Miyamoto offered a formal salute from the boarding ramp, a gesture of respect from one leader to another. Marin returned it, the motion coming back to her as naturally as breathing. The UES Vanguard rose majestically into the sky, its massive form growing smaller until it was just a speck against the blue. Then, with a flash of its drive systems, it was gone, leaving New Clio to forge its own path once more. In the months that followed, the colony underwent a transformation. Under Marin's guidance, they established a comprehensive defense network, including orbital sensors and ground-based early warning systems. A volunteer militia trained regularly, learning not just how to fight, but when fighting was necessary and when it wasn't. The orbital farms were rebuilt, their new design incorporating armored sections and redundant systems. The crystal marshes, recovered from the toxic rainfall, once again glowed with bioluminescent life at night. Trade routes were re-established, this time with coalition escorts for the most vulnerable sections. The pirates, having lost their leader and a significant portion of their fleet to the Vanguard's intervention, turned their attention to easier targets. And at the heart of it all was Governor Marin Vasquez, no longer torn between her military past and her civilian present, but instead finding strength in both identities. She had come to Nucleo seeking peace, and now understood that true peace required vigilance and, sometimes, the willingness to fight for what you believed in. One evening, as she completed her daily inspection of the colony's defenses, Marin paused at the edge of the crystal marshes. The twin moons of Nucleo cast their pale light across the landscape, making the crystal formations sparkle like stars brought down to earth. Elder Priestess Nima emerged from the marshes, her robes glittering with collected crystals. "The waters speak of balance restored," she said, by way of greeting. Marin smiled. The Marshborn ways were still somewhat mysterious to her, but she had learned to respect their deep connection to the planet. "Is that what they say?" she asked. Nema nodded, her ancient eyes reflecting the moonlight. "They speak of the darkness that came and the light that answered. They speak of you, Governor." "I just did what was necessary," Marin demurred. "As we all must," the elder agreed. "But not all hear the call as clearly as you did. Not all answer with such courage." They stood in companionable silence, watching as the bioluminescent flora began to glow, adding their ethereal blue light to the silvery moonlight. "The beacon you sent," Nima said finally. "It reached farther than you know." Marin glanced at her, curious. "What do you mean?" "A call for help echoes," the elder explained. "It touches hearts beyond just those who answer. The vanguard came, yes, but others heard as well. They watch now, with new eyes." Before Marin could ask for clarification, Arya's voice came through her comm unit. "Governor, we're receiving a transmission from the UES Vanguard. Captain Miyamoto sends her regards and reports that the responder corridor has been officially sanctioned by Coalition Command. Nucleo is now designated as a priority protection zone." Marin acknowledged the message, a sense of satisfaction warming her. The colony's future was secure, not just because of external protection, but because they had learned to protect themselves. "A new beginning," Nima observed, as if reading her thoughts. "Yes," Marin agreed, "but this time, with our eyes open." As night fell fully over Nucleo, the crystal marshes glowed with their mysterious light, a beacon of their own that seemed to reach up toward the stars. And somewhere among those stars, Marin knew, the UES Vanguard continued its patrol, a guardian in the darkness, ready to answer when called. But Nucleo would not call again, at least, not in desperation. They had found their balance, their strength. They had found their voice. And in the vast expanse of space, that voice would be heard.